Thank you, everyone. Patient delegates. Today we have been doing this now for more than 24 hours because of yesterday. मुझे अब तो counting भी खत्म हो गई. I'm Noor Warsia. I'm the Group Editorial Director of Businessworld, and I have two fantastic marketers, people, and leaders who are discussing a rather discussed subject, but because of all the changes around us, back on the anvil to understand what's going on. So creativity versus technology. The first question I was asked, why creativity versus technology? Didn't we go past this? But we spent time, and I explained what we were trying to understand is that today when designers and artists have access to all these tools that can directly create a lot of final output, what really happens to the creative mind or to creativity or their coexistence? And they had some fantastic point of views. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and begin with that. My first question, of course, it is going to go to Sumit actually, because he has some examples over here that we thought we will try and understand. If you had to just give us a sense, really, how much of a difference is what we are seeing in the form of generative AI, etc., making a difference to you at your workplace today? Anything that you want to share with us?
No, we were discussing this, Noor, and I think for the entire set of audience here, I think the difference is palpable. You can see it in terms of the kind of work that we are doing on a day in, day out basis. You know, to give you a context, at 197 or Paytm, you know, because we are an app-based company, we will have a lot of, at a very simple level, banners, WhatsApp messages, text notifications, etc., that we are creating, right, in thousands. Now, those are stuff that you don't necessarily need to be able to require the creative mind, the way we'll talk about it a lot. These are stuff that once you have given it a basic thought, you can just very quickly adapt. And I think that's something that we are seeing with the tools that are there in the market right now. We are able to do a very good job with it. And in two ways. One, to create, and then to adapt as well, because India is a multilingual country, right, at the end of the day. So are you trying to create your customer service videos, for example, right, do not require the most amount of creativity. You are trying to solve a functional problem, and it's a great way of doing that. So I have personally experienced with my team the use of some of the tools that we discussed, Midjourney being one of them, for example.
Yes, of
right?
course.
I think that's been a hot topic through the last 2 days. But I do certainly see a value of being able to leverage such tools with your teams to be able to do either the adapts part of it and equally the creation part of it. I think what it would not take away from, and I'm sure we'll have that conversation today, is the power of mind and the power of a creative idea, right? I think that's something certainly is, at least in my experience till on what I have been seeing, not replicable in the work that we have been doing.
Excellent. Midjourney did come up a lot of times today, and one of the reasons for that was two brands that had similar creative, and somebody was quoting that example, but many people were actually seeing this or experiencing this volume of creativity, and therefore technology can assist you, and hence they're still coexisting in some sense. But Deepali, I want to take this to you. You've heard what Sumit had said. From your perspective, do you see the marketing ecosystem realigning because of the way things are changing on this front?
Yes, I clearly do. And I just want to step back for a moment before I answer your question in terms of, how the marketing ecosystem will realign itself. I think if we go back 15 years, first digital marketing happened, and that changed the life of marketers and the marketing ecosystem. In the second wave came the MarTech tools, which used AI and ML. Okay, not generative AI. That didn't exist, right? And the MarTech tools once again changed the marketing ecosystem, the way we were using skills inside a marketing organization, and the kind of partners and vendors we had, and the kind of tools we had, right? This is a beginning of the third wave now, where generative AI tools are now going to once again put us on the path of realigning our ecosystem. So let's go back now to the example that Sumit gave, right? His team is doing, let's say, video generation, volumes required, simplistic videos, and that does not necessarily require the services of a very large creative agency or even a creative boutique, and therefore we need to understand who was doing that kind of a job earlier, right? Or for example, you require 2000 banners, or you require product descriptions on an e-commerce site. Something that human beings were doing earlier, and there was mushrooming of shops in the last 5 years who offered, for example, content for product description, or the so-called BTL agencies that we had, who would do 20 adaptations for you of the same creative because it needed to be used in 20 different places, right? I think those part of the marketing ecosystem, chances are, will perhaps not exist tomorrow. I think they need to think about their existence to say, okay, if we were a shop basically using human, bodies to do this manual work within the creative function, then I think that's the part that's going to get squeezed, right? However, like we've had in the past, big creative shops, the CMOs, the strategic ability, inside a CMO organization will continue to have a role and will continue to be important, because a generative AI tool cannot be commanded by your CEO. Okay? It does require a CMO and his organization to direct and give them boundaries of, which area to operate in. What will be very interesting for us to see is that within the marketing ecosystem, large brands with large appetite for, millions of creatives a year will operate differently and may use the whole tool in-house, like, Sumit's team does. And, we were earlier discussing it, and Sumit was telling us how his team uses it, versus, let's say, I, for example, have 10 different organizations because I'm a group CMO, somewhere. And there are very specific brands who may not have appetite for such large volumes, and therefore we may not use generative AI for production of so many creators, because our whole focus is on quality creative, which are very, very differentiated.
Excellent, excellent. Completely got it. Did you want to say something, Sumit? I almost felt you did.
No, I think the point is right. I think it's ultimately going to be a matter of choice. In fact, even at our end, right, not everything would be done through AI. When you get into large scale campaigns, when there's a spark of an idea that is needed, I don't think those are things that are going to get replicated so easily. I think the magic is in the fact that there is just so much available for the design and the creative people to leap from, and that's something I've been noticing with my teams, that suddenly what needed a day to be done can be done in 30 minutes, right? And that's the part of, that's not the interesting part of the work they always enjoyed, right? Because what they enjoyed was cracking the idea, right? That's still did, right? We recently did an Independence Day campaign as well, right? Where we created scratch cards which were inspired from leaders of yesteryears, right? But that idea that it has to be done about leaders of yesteryear still needs to come.
Absolutely.
Yes,
What you're able to create, of course, is then faster. So.
But despite this, one of the underlying point from both of your comments is there will be a part of the creative process where we have human skill sets or human beings operating it right now, which will get replaced. There is still a layer. It could be the layer down there. It could be the less creative thinking, less strategic layer, but it will get replaced.
Yes, and I'm not sure if it is the large or the more important part of the creative process that will get replaced.
Right.
I would tend to think it's the less important, routine, burdensome part of the creative process that is going to get replaced.
Excellent. We are dedicating today to young marketers, and that this conversation comes up a lot. They're already in a place where they know that they have to change their skill sets to be relevant in the next 5, 6, 7 years. But I loved it, Deepali, that you mentioned about MarTech before this, right? Because in the case of MarTech, there was some time before marketers started taking MarTech and AdTech seriously. It was still out of the company. It was still handled by, a set of vendors before you took it in-house. But that did not happen with generative AI. That was the change was really fast. So the pace of change, which we have said is really fast, is actually becoming much faster. Now, are the skill sets that we are looking and talking about today, will they still be relevant even from a creative and strategic standpoint, and the upper funnel of the creative process, if I can use that in that sense, for the next, say, 2 years also? Are we saying these jobs are still safe for the next 2 years?
You want me to go first? Okay. So I think next 2 years, I can safely tell you that I think the strategic aspect of doing a creative brief, for example, which happens inside a CMO organization, and then it goes to a large creative agency for them to, let's say, do the shape of a brand. things such as brand positioning, things such as what a brand book looks like, things such as what is the world of a brand that defines the boundary conditions, for both ATL and BTL, let's say, I'm just taking those as examples to get created, will clearly be part of a strategic process where the current skill sets and more importantly, the experience of the team will matter, both on the agency vendor partner side as well as, on the brand side or the client side, if I may call it. What will matter is that are you doing experimentation enough inside your organization for you to know what generative AI can do for you? And therefore, are you charting out a path for the future? So that's what's going to happen in the next 2 years, okay? Charting out a path for the future with different experimentations. What we all need to do in the marketing ecosystem is to be ready to learn from each other. It is extremely important for us to not posture, if I may say so, and say we know what it is all about, but it is for us, I think, to have the humility to say, look, Paytm is using it differently, and let's say a Tanishq is using it very differently, and we at for example, we have fertility and IVF clinics, and we may be using it very differently, to learn from each other and say, okay, what are the use cases? Are we saving cost on account of it? Are we saving, human effort on account of it? Are we making our team's jobs more interesting on account of it? And then say, okay, here's a use case, for either increasing human spirit, if I may use the term, or, saving cost, or creating efficiencies in terms of speed, maybe, right? So I think eventually it will boil down to that. It will not be generative AI for the sake of generative AI.
Excellent, excellent.
On this, honestly, and this debate is very similar to two more debates which have sort of, and I think we had on these stages, some of these stages we have done. The modern trade versus general trade debate, right? Will general trade exist? In fact, now there's quick commerce as well. Yeah, the TV versus digital debate, right? And TV is doing pretty fine, by the way, right now as well. Yeah, it's growing. I think and the same thing will hold, right? There will be a coexistence that will always happen. What's important for every marketeer, as senior or as junior for that matter, is to be able to have the humility to unlearn and learn. That is the only thing that is necessary to stay relevant in some of these, right? I think for me, that's probably the only mantra I would ask people to do, that accept it, understand it, and then use it where you think it's relevant.
Perfect.
I just want to mention here, so therefore I think going back to what Sumit has said, which is unlearn and learn, I think that's required at every level in the marketing team. So whether you are a 5-year-old in the system, 10-year-old in the system, or 25-year-old in the system, I think it's very important to learn what's happening, because the world is changing around you. No book is going to get written about it. No article is going to, accelerate your education after 2 years. So it's very important that you live through it and then, learn and utilize it.
All right, Sumit, I still want you to weigh in on my next question. The problem about we want the youngcomers and we want the younger minds, and they also want to experiment and explore. But fact is that, once something goes wrong, which it can in something like generative AI, which is so new, somebody will be held accountable. So how can marketers or senior leaders build the right kind of, or advise on the right kind of guardrails, so that you at least know that you're safely, I know this is the worst way to put it, but you're safely experimenting and still trying to push the envelope?
I would say there's a hard part and there's a soft part to this, Noor, right? I think as leaders, it's important that we foster in our own teams the ability to experiment. And sometimes there are risks. Sometimes you have to take it on your shoulders to help them, so that you don't want to kill experimentation before something starts, right? I think that's one point. Having said that, this whole, and we were talking about this example of, because of AI, because of generative AI, the fact that, especially on visuals, there can be infringement issues. I think that's a basic check that people need to be able to develop in their organizations, whether it is internally, whether it is with the agencies that you are working with. To be honest, these issues of plagiarism, etc., have happened before generative AI as well. I don't think it's a new challenge. Sometimes with intent, a lot of times without intent as well. But I think there should be a robustness of every creative person, there should be a system in place. And in some cases there is, in some companies do it better than others, but we need to be able to put that system in place so that before you are taking a creative output in the market, you're doing some gross check on whether, it's something very similar has been done or not.
Absolutely correct. A basic kind of you're absolutely right. There has to be some kind of a code of conduct in place since we now know that this change is happening. But it does lead us to the question of ethics in this. Your agency, whatever work they're doing, the marketer is expecting that the agency has put their mind, their brain behind it, right? If I'm writing a story and I've put it out there for my reader is hoping that a human being has written the story. But actually, ChatGPT can write an excellent story for you, unfortunately, sometimes better than some of our young writers. This is unfortunate, and I'm hoping none of my young writers are in the room.
English and the grammar is for sure better.
Yeah, I'm hoping none of my young writers are in the room, and hopefully I can only see one of them, unfortunately, but she's a good writer. Coming back to how do we look at ethics, the question of ethics in this, while we still encourage this? I'll go for it.
I think there is two parts of the ethics question. Sumit used the words intent versus, let's say, coincidence, right? I think if the intention is to be unethical, then generative AI or not, you will be, right? And we can't help it and prevent it. But I think what you need to do is to create processes and systems as a marketing organization as well as an agency to ensure that you do not end up looking similar to something else or somebody else. What does that mean? I mean, today, the use cases that we've seen and heard about today are all about either generative AI producing written content or producing visual content, right? Whether still pictures, still images or videos, right? And that requires, let's say, human imagery or, other kinds of imagery, right? Now, just as an example, and this is just an example that I want to share, if you decide in a systemic way inside your organization that we will never use the generative AI content as is, but we will make, let's say, 20% changes to it, because we want to use a stamp of our brand. The human imagery produced by the generative AI may be similar to something else they've done, so therefore we're going to change it in some manner, right? Now, if you have that process, and second, what Sumit said, I think your teams, your agencies should be knowing what competition's doing and, what has already been used. They need to be on the ball, for that. And the third very important thing, according to me, from a systemic perspective is that we must look for generative AI tools who hold themselves responsible. Ideally, I do not want to be querying on a generative AI and my competition also to be querying on the generative AI and them producing similar results, and the generative AI is learnt by the benefit of my queries, because today what is going to be gold in future is going to be the queries and the way you query. By the way, there are certificate courses now on how to do queries on generative AI. Okay? Yeah, because I was on Tome the other day, and I had to write it 10 times in terms of, what I really wanted. And so there are people who are going to become experts in terms of how to do querying, on generative AI. So coming back to my point, the tools themselves need to hold themselves responsible to say they don't give the same image to, let's say, 2 different queries, and I think we marketers, should demand that, out of the tools, if there is a tool which is servicing the needs only of, let's say, of the marketers or the, creative output.
Excellent. We're on the last 5 minutes, amazingly, but I still have questions, so I'm not going to open it to the floor. I'm sorry, but I wanted to understand the marketer-partner relationship, and the partner could be anybody, your creative agency, your design agency, anybody. Now that we are saying that a part of your creative process is going to be automated, for want of a better word right now, that's going to happen. Or do you expect marketers to then start questioning how will it change their relationship with their partner? There was a certain time limit that you would not allow actually ever. The briefs are always as of yesterday, but, for those who did, the expectation of what you were doing so far and what you should or would be doing now because of technology, do you see some kind of a change in that partnership?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the best example, this is still early, right? But if you think about it, the best example could be traditional TV agencies versus digital agencies. Why did the mushrooming of so many agencies happen? Because some of the traditional agencies were not able to adapt as fast, right? And now they have been doing it, right? So now a lot of the all the 3 big agencies in the country, they have very quickly tried to adapt now. Yeah, correct, right. And I think that's how it will progress. And that it goes back to the point on, even from our partners' perspective, that they need to quickly unlearn and learn. This is here to stay, right? So speed will go up, expectations will be high in terms of what needs to be done. And therefore, for our agencies to be able to be on with us in terms of the learning curve, and I guess it will be a co-learning in this case, because it's going so fast between the clients and the agencies. But yes, the short answer to your question is it will dramatically change, and if the agencies that are able to adapt will win the race.
Excellent. Deepali, you wanted to put a sense on that? You see the relationship changing?
No, I think I'll go with what Sumit said, but what I also want to say is that inside the CMO organization, the relationship and the authority and the approval process will change, along with this. Because as you go on to the path of needing more and more creatives, newer and newer creatives, and the speed and personalization and everything, higher usage of both generative AI and MarTech tools, let me give an example of what I mean. I think 20 years ago, I was the marketing head of a brand where no creative went out without me seeing it, right? As a CMO, even 10 years ago, every creative that went out, I would see it, right? Today, it is just not physically possible for me to do it with the amount of content that gets out. And therefore, I need to train the team. We need to have the guardrails in place. We need to have a process in place. And I also need to therefore train the team and delegate, some of it, which is delegation with responsibility, not abdication of authority, right? Not abdication of responsibility. I think that is going to be a very different relationship within the team also.
No, I love you said that. Did you want to add something, Sumit? I love you said that because both of these are also our top marketers this year, and I am feeling very proud of that right now. They both have talked about co-learning, they've talked about humility, they have talked about how you must set a process before you start actually judging people on it, and how you can work together or grow together, so that anybody, any agency, any partner who's working with those kind of leaders, it's their good luck, right? There is just time for one question. I'm looking at everybody if anybody has one. Otherwise, last final advice from you to young marketers. Deepali, you can take a look at it first. How should young marketers look at their own careers when disruption is happening at the pace that it is happening?
I think not just young marketers, even the older marketers. I think don't be shy to learn. And I think the younger ones, the importance of learning marketing history. I think what has happened to the world of marketing today is that each domain has become very specialized. So young marketers are entering the space of the brand world either through content or through social media or through campaign management or just being SEO specialists or just being in performance marketing or just doing brand management. I think the opportunity that the older set of marketers had of being generalists within marketing is why they can manage strategy, much better. I think my advice to the younger one would be get the opportunity, take the opportunity of learning all functions within marketing if you want to have a career which spans 30 years, because a specialist function and learning about a specialist function may get you fast money in the next 10 years, but you may also reach a plateau within that specialist function in the next 10 years.
Thank you so much, Deepali.
I think not very different from what Deepali said, but the pace of change will always be there. So learn, unlearn will happen, but the fundamentals of marketing won't change. So your Porters and the Akers of the world will always remain, and therefore it is very important to get your basics always right. Do not get carried away very early in your career on a very, very specialist track, which is also important to get that expertise, but really, it goes back to the same conversation, right? Did the principles of good creative fundamentally change between TV and digital, right? And I think that's the key in my mind, that do not undermine the importance of what the core basic principles of marketing are. They will always hold test of time.
Chalo, all right, excellent. Please join me in applauding my two fantastic panelists. Thank you so much. Great comments, both of you. Thank you.